Emma Sullivan, 34, was a veteran who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. 3 years ago, she had been caught in an IED explosion that left visible scars across her face and neck, a permanent roadmap of survival etched into her skin. When she returned home, the administrative jobs that matched her military experience mysteriously vanished. Employers were put off once they saw her in person. After 6 months of rejection, Emma reluctantly accepted a waitressing job at a small diner in her rural hometown. Rent needed to be paid, and Dottie's Diner was the only place that would hire her. Each day, Emma worked diligently, never complaining and never mentioning her past. She learned to ignore the stares, the whispers, and the way parents instinctively pulled their children closer when she approached their tables. This particular Sunday morning, the diner was packed with the after-church crowd. Emma balanced 3 plates on her arm while holding a pitcher of orange juice in her other hand. As she carefully set down a plate of pancakes, she heard the unmistakable hiss of whispered judgment. Why would they hire someone who looks like that? Ruins my appetite completely, one person muttered. Emma turned away, maintaining her silence. The pitcher in her hand trembled slightly, causing ripples across the orange liquid surface. Dottie, the diner owner, witnessed the exchange from behind the counter. Instead of offering support to her employee, Dottie frowned at Emma, as if she had caused a disturbance by merely existing. A young child, walking past with his mother, pointed directly at Emma's face and loudly asked, "Mommy, what happened to that lady's face?" The mother yanked her son's arm and hurried away, without so much as acknowledging Emma. "Don't stare," she scolded her child loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's rude to look at people like that." Emma forced a smile, focusing on her breathing, the way her therapist had taught her. In through the nose, count to 4, out through the mouth, count to 6. The rhythm had gotten her through firefights in Kabul, and it could get her through Sunday brunch in Tennessee. "Order up for table 7, the cook called out. Emma collected the plates, adjusting her name tag, which displayed a tiny American flag pin, the only acknowledgement of her service she allowed herself at work. Most customers never noticed it. "Could we get some more coffee over here?" A man at table 5 waved impatiently, visibly recoiling when he saw who would be serving him. Emma pretended not to notice. During a brief lull, she retreated to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. The mirror reflected back the scars, pink puckered skin that medical procedures could only partially address. The skin pulled at the corner of her right eye, creating a permanent dimple in her cheek. She had stopped seeing them years ago. Why couldn't others? When Emma returned to the dining room, she noticed a teenage boy at table 9 watching her intently. Unlike the others, he wasn't staring at her scars. He was looking directly into her eyes, his hand resting over his heart in a gesture she hadn't seen since leaving the military. "If you believe good people deserve to be remembered, stay here with us," the boy's eyes seemed to say. Emma continued her shift, though the weight of judgment grew heavier with each passing minute. The whispers became more audible, the stares more brazen. Even Melissa, the other waitress on duty, had started taking tables that should have been Emma's. "Table 4 needs a refill," Melissa said, deliberately avoiding Emma's eyes. "But maybe I should take it. They seem particularly demanding." Emma understood the implication. "I can handle my section," she replied quietly, reaching for the coffee pot. As she approached table 4, an elderly man in a golf shirt looked up at her, his face contorted in undisguised disgust. "Isn't there someone normal who can bring our food?" he sneered. The words hit Emma like physical blows. She had survived combat, endured explosions, and stared down the fiercest of enemies. Yet these casual cruelties still had the power to wound her deeply. She lowered her eyes, her breath catching in her throat as the tears she had held back for so long began to blur her vision. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir," she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll see if someone else can assist you." The man's companion, a woman wearing expensive jewelry and a perfectly manicured appearance, chimed in, her tone dripping with condescension. "It's just that we're trying to eat, you know. It's distracting." Emma nodded mechanically, her heart sinking as she retreated toward the kitchen, taking careful steps to steady herself. 7 steps, just 7 more, and she would be safely out of their sight. That was all she needed to get through, without breaking down. But Dottie, the diner owner, intercepted her behind the counter, pulling her toward the staff room. "Emma, honey, could I have a word?" Dottie's voice was gentle, but Emma could hear the concern beneath it. The small office smelled of stale cigarettes and cheap air freshener. Dottie fidgeted with a stack of receipts, avoiding Emma's gaze. "Look, I value your work ethic." "I do," Dottie began, her voice faltering. "But if customers are uncomfortable, I understand." Emma's voice remained steady despite the crack forming in her heart. "I'll finish my shift." Dottie hesitated before continuing. "You need to think about business. Maybe we can move you to kitchen duty or evening shifts when it's darker and less crowded." Emma had once received a Purple Heart for bravery under fire. She had coordinated medical evacuations while bullets tore through the tent around her. But now, she was being asked to hide in the shadows because her wounds made people uncomfortable. She clenched her jaw, not allowing the sting of betrayal to show. "I'll finish my shift," she repeated, her voice firm. Back in the dining room, Emma noticed the teenage boy at table 9 was still watching her. He looked about 16, with earnest eyes that seemed older than his years. Unlike the others, his gaze held no disgust, only a quiet intensity that Emma couldn't interpret. At table 8, a group of men in business casual attire were enjoying their meal when one of them noticed Emma refilling water glasses nearby. "Hey, Jim," one called his friend, deliberately raising his voice. "Remember that horror movie we saw last week? The main character kind of looks like her." He jerked his head toward Emma. Laughter rippled through the group. One man had the decency to look uncomfortable, but he joined in anyway. What no one in the diner knew was that Emma's scars came from an act of extraordinary heroism. She had pushed 2 fellow soldiers away from an exploding vehicle. The official military report had described her actions as extraordinary heroism in the face of grave danger. The explosion had killed 3 others instantly. Emma had dragged a wounded comrade 100 yards to safety despite her own severe injuries. Now, she accepted mockery with the same stoic resolve she had shown on the battlefield. The teenage boy at table 9 stood slightly, as if about to speak, but then sat back down when his mother placed a gentle hand on his arm. His eyes never left Emma, watching intently as she endured yet another cutting remark, another deliberate snub. What Emma didn't know was that the boy was Tyler James, the son of Captain Michael James, a soldier who had served in her unit. Tyler had grown up hearing stories about the brave medic who had saved multiple lives during their deployment. His father had shown him pictures of his unit, including one of Emma, standing proudly in her uniform before the explosion. Tyler had recognized her immediately, not from the scars, but from her eyes. The same determined eyes that had looked out from the photographs his father kept on the mantel. The same eyes that had remained unchanged despite everything. The tension in the diner escalated when a new group entered and was seated in Emma's section. For men in golf attire, loud and demanding from the moment they sat down. "Hey, Scarface," one called out, a sneer in his voice. "Can we get some service over here?" His companions burst into laughter, the sound cutting through the room like a knife. Emma approached their table, her notepad ready, her professional smile firmly in place despite the deliberate cruelty. "Welcome to Dottie's Diner," she said, her voice steady. "What can I get for you today, Dottie's?" Emma greeted, trying to maintain her composure. But before she could finish, another man's voice cut through the air. "What happened to your face?" he asked bluntly. Emma hesitated but quickly replied, "Bar fight. Car accident." "I can recommend the pancake special," she continued, deliberately ignoring his question. "Or our famous country breakfast. Comes with—" "I asked you a question," the man interrupted, his voice dropping to a menacing tone. "What's wrong with your face?" The entire diner seemed to hold its breath. At the counter, Dottie pretended to be engrossed in the register, and Melissa quickly disappeared into the kitchen. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, but her voice remained quiet yet steady as she answered, "I was injured while serving in Afghanistan." "Afghanistan?" the man snorted. One of his friends nudged him, laughing, probably working kitchen duty, and spilled something on herself. A woman in combat? What a joke. Emma's hand trembled slightly, and her pen scratched unevenly across her notepad. She had been a combat medic assigned to a forward surgical team, but explaining that felt like a futile exercise. With as much calm as she could muster, she said, "I'll give you gentlemen a moment to decide," and began to walk away. "No, wait," one man called out, knocking his water glass to the floor deliberately. "Look what you made me do with your shaking. Clean it up." Emma bent down to gather the broken glass, feeling her cheeks burn with humiliation. The weight of dozens of eyes on her back felt unbearable. "Emma, enough!" Dottie's voice sliced through the silence, and she emerged from behind the counter. "That's it. You're making everyone uncomfortable. I need you to clock out." Emma stood frozen, shards of glass still in her hands. "I haven't finished my shift." "I'm sorry," Dottie said, "but it's just not working out. These disruptions are bad for business." Emma didn't respond right away. She stood motionless, not from shock, but from the sheer effort it took to not break down in front of everyone. She had survived worse, much worse, but now she couldn't hold back the words. "You're firing me because of how I look?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Dottie didn't meet her gaze. "I'm firing you because customers are complaining." The tension in the diner was suffocating. Some patrons looked down at their plates in shame. Others watched with morbid fascination. Yet no one spoke up. It was at that moment that Tyler, the teenager from Table 9, rose to his feet. He stepped away from his family's booth and walked to the center of the diner. His mother reached for him, whispering, "Tyler, sit down." But he gently shook off her hand. "Can I say something?" Tyler asked, his voice cracking slightly with adolescent uncertainty and emotion. The unusual interruption caused everyone to turn, and the diner fell completely silent. Tyler looked directly at Emma, then turned to address the room of strangers. His voice grew stronger as he spoke. "She saved my father's life. Twice." The statement hung in the air, powerful in its simplicity. Tyler pulled a worn photograph from his wallet and held it up for everyone to see. "This is my dad," he said, showing a picture of a soldier in combat fatigues, his arm around a female medic. Emma, before her scars. "Captain Michael James, 10th Mountain Division, 2 Purple Hearts." Tyler walked closer to Emma, his respect evident in his posture. "My dad told us how their convoy was ambushed, how Sergeant Sullivan, Emma, pulled him from a burning Humvee after the IED hit. She carried him almost a football field's length while under fire. She used her own body to shield him from a secondary explosion." Emma stood motionless, her tears now flowing freely down her scarred face. "Those scars you're all staring at? That's what courage looks like." An elderly man in the corner slowly stood, his movements deliberate. He addressed the room. "I served in Vietnam," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. 48 years ago. I've been sitting here, watching this happen and saying nothing." He turned to Emma and offered a formal salute. "Ma'am, I apologize for my cowardice today." A woman at a nearby table wiped tears from her eyes. "I'm so ashamed," she whispered, her voice thick with guilt. Even the men who had been mocking Emma seemed stunned into silence, their arrogance deflated by the teenager's simple, heartfelt testimony. Dottie approached Emma, but her steps were softer now. The room felt different, more respectful, more understanding. Emma could only stand there, tears still falling. As the weight of the moment settled in, her earlier authority was now replaced with visible remorse. "Emma, I didn't know. I never asked," Dottie said, her voice filled with regret. Tyler, addressing the entire room, spoke up. "You just decided who she was by looking at her." One by one, people began to stand. First, Tyler's family, then the elderly veteran, and then others. It was a silent acknowledgement of their collective failure, and a tribute to the woman they had judged so cruelly. The diner, once filled with tension, erupted in applause, not for good service or a special occasion, but because, for the first time, they truly saw the beauty in the scars they had previously scorned. "Have you ever made the right choice when everyone else walked away?" Tyler's voice carried through the room. The atmosphere had shifted from judgment to understanding, and Emma felt it deeply. "Your story matters too," he added. Within a week, Dottie's Diner proudly displayed a new sign in the window, proudly serving veterans. All welcome here. But Emma didn't stay long after that day. A representative from the Veterans Affairs Office reached out, offering her a position as communications coordinator for their outreach program. We need people who understand what it means to come home changed, they told her. On her last day at the diner, customers lined up to leave her tips and notes of appreciation. Some apologized directly. Others couldn't meet her eyes, but their generosity spoke volumes. Dottie, visibly softened, presented Emma with a framed painting from a local artist. It was a portrait of Emma in her waitress uniform, but with an American flag in the background. So we never forget what service really looks like, Dottie said, her usual brusque manner now softened by genuine remorse. Tyler and his family became regular visitors to the VA office where Emma worked. His father, Captain James, volunteered alongside her to help veterans struggling with their return to civilian life. 6 months later, Emma was invited to speak at the local high school's Veterans Day Assembly. As she approached the podium, she saw Tyler in the front row, standing at attention like a young soldier. When it was his turn to introduce her, he stood tall before his peers and said, "Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear aprons and serve you breakfast. Sometimes they carry scars that tell stories of courage most of us will never understand." Emma touched the raised tissue along her jawline, a gesture that had once been self-conscious but now carried pride. She had stopped seeing her scars as disfigurements. They were proof that she had faced unimaginable danger and survived to help others. "Scars don't make us ugly," she began her speech. "They tell the story of a battle we survived, often so others could live." She paused, looking directly at Tyler, then continued, "And sometimes it takes just 6 words from a brave young person to make the whole world stop and listen." Across town, Dottie's Diner now featured a wall of honor, displaying photos of local veterans. At its center hung Emma's picture, with a small plaque that read, "Courage serves daily. Have you witnessed or experienced injustice like this?" Emma asked, "Share your story. It deserves to be heard too." The final words of her speech lingered in the air, a powerful reminder that standing up for what's right can change lives and inspire others to do the same. "Subscribe for more incredible stories," Emma said, a smile now replacing the pain in her eyes. "So you too can remind you daily that doing what's right is never done alone." "Miss, your face looks disgusting." The waitress froze in the middle of the diner. Her hand trembled, water spilling onto her skirt as laughter erupted from a nearby table. The scars on her cheeks stood out harshly under the fluorescent lights. She didn't speak, didn't react, but then a teenage boy in the corner booth stood up, looked directly at them, and said exactly 6 words. "Have you witnessed injustice like this? Type yes if it broke your heart too."